happened last time. Hello. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Tonight you got me, Anna, and Henry.
Hello. I'm a little guy. I just sit in the corner. I don't do much. I just sit here and be quiet.
Well, not for very long. We are going to be discussing the last few chapters of The Future of the Professions by Daniel and Richard Susskind. This is chapter 6, and then rounding it out, I suppose aptly entitled Objections and Anxieties and After the Professions. But to start off, we're going to kind of go back a little bit back to last week and talk a little bit more about AIs. Because a lot of the anxieties and objections stem from, the coming of the robots, the dawn of the robots. And as extreme as that sounds, that's where people go when we talk about introducing more and more technology into our everyday working processes. So what are your thoughts, Henry?
Yeah, well, it's just, I think the problem with artificial intelligence is what people think it is versus what it really is. People leap straight to Terminator. They jump straight to Hollywood.
I have to say, I some AI things like the Google play with our AI experiment games last week. I did share it on social media, phrasing it as this is really fun, but I think I'm helping Skynet become self-aware.
Yeah, it's a big difference because I think that's if you're imagining a full kind of living creature that was an artificial intelligence, evolutionarily speaking, where we're at the moment is we're just about on vision, just about. It can pretty much recognize patterns, pretty much. So you can go through airport security a lot quicker because it's quite happy for a machine to verify your face against your passport, which is cool. I'm happy with that. But that's a vision task. Natural language, there's a huge difference and discrepancy between Google Assistant, Apple's Siri, Microsoft's Cortana, and Amazon's, I don't know that one, the Amazon one.
Echo? Is it?
That's the product.
Oh, that's the thing, isn't it? There's a name for...
Sandra. I'm calling it Sandra. That's what it's called now. So, there's a lot of difference between how those operate and their ability to pick up accents and, this kind of stuff that we know how to do. We understand the science of it, but we still can't get computers to do it. So the idea that we will have robots caring for people, pretty much laughable at the moment. Sure, you can get cute toys that are, a little bit interactive and give you a little bit of, a little bit of a nice feeling in your heart, but it's not really the same thing. And I think there's that that whole kind of actual consciousness is not something that AI is working on. AI is working on taking big data sets and trying to squeeze some sort of meaning out of them. It's working on vision. It's working on language. It's not working on any sort of conscious model. So the great example is IBM Watson, and I think they talk about it in this book, and it was one of the bits that struck me as being a bit off because it beat people at Jeopardy, and that was its great crowning achievement. But that was one thing, and that was one section, that was one tool specific to that task. So it wasn't like it was, hey, Watson, we're going to ask you about Jeopardy today. It was a Jeopardy winning game. It was a tool to win Jeopardy. That's what it was. So the idea that you can just take some, lump of code that's called AI and go, hey, can you solve this problem for me? And it will turn its mind to its problem and it will solve it. It's just laughable. This had a specific, language recognition, and it had specific lookup functions, and it was about solving those problems. So it's not, so this whole idea of, you know, AI just automatically solving problems, and we just feed it in, like, you know, we feed it problems and it just comes back to us with ideas. It's just,
Well, yes,
no,
the test sets, so to speak, are for very specific things now, aren't they? It's
Hello, Maya.
Hi, Maya. You can hear her, can you?
Let's have a Maya moment. How is Maya?
Maya is quite upset.
Aww.
How is Maya? We could see it. We could see Maya.
Hello, Maya. Hello.
Maya's not impressed.
Hello.
Maya's not impressed that Mommy's discussing AIs on a Thursday night.
You look like you want to be all warm and cuddled. Yeah.
She's yeah. And I mean,
Yeah,
speaking about medical carers and so forth in AIs, we've all remember that scene in Star Wars where Luke and Leia were delivered by the robo midwife, and that had a long way to go before.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be
advanced.
You have a baby. Yes.
Thanks. Yeah. Aw. Hello, you.
Oh. Sure.
No, Mummy's in the room. You're going into charming mode, I see.
Oh, so she'll sit with Mommy and discuss AIs.
I don't mind.
All right, we'll discuss the book. It's Bring Your Underwear to the Book Club, which we could perfectly do.
Of modern technology, we may not be autonomously solving complex language problems, but we can sit there with our young ones having a very sensible conversation about AI. That's all good by me.
It's kind of relevant because there is this number banging about in a few news articles, and some say it was from the U.S. Department of Labor, but I tracked it down. It's actually from the World Economic Forum, and the number was that 65% of students, or primary school students today, will be entering into jobs that don't exist yet. So yeah, what do you want to do, Maya?
Well, do you know, if Maya had been born 60 years previously, then there were jobs available such as the person who picked up the pins at the end of bowling alleys. That's the one that I always remember. There have been lots of jobs that have come and gone for tasks that we didn't realize we could automate, you know. And someone came along with a good idea and went, hey, check this out. Just do it that way. It's easy. So, you know, I don't...
It's about how fine-tuned we can get things, isn't it? Because in theory, if something is repetitive enough, and if we fed it enough information, it could be routinized, which is the term they use in the book, or automated, which is probably the more common.
Yeah, automated would be the routinized. Not great.
It doesn't roll off the tongue.
Richard.
Yeah.
Rather than your editor, Oxford University Press. We expect better of you.
Routinization.
Routinization. That sounds like bad map, like bad orienteering.
Yes.
Yeah, I routinized my way to work and I got lost.
It sounds like it should come with a little hourglass that spins. Routinizing.
I'm sorry, your problem has been routinized.
Yes.
I feel like the more we say this word, the less it's gonna mean.
Yeah. Anyway, routinization. Is what people really want to do with them is kind of harness them for super forecasting, and everyone's really keen. But this goes back to the current issues of the day, where in practice, lots of data scientists are getting jobs. Everyone's happy to have their own data scientists or their own kind of enclave of data scientists. But more often than not, and I'm not going to say from where, but there are data scientists who says, yes, I got this job, it's great. I do. It's still...
There's a data scientist who's a physicist working at, I was listening to it today on the radio just on the way back in. Anyway, they analyze huge data sets for sentiment for films,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you know, potentially a little bit cynical in terms of, you know, having just like pulling a crank and going, right, these are the films you're going to get because the robot says this is what you like, which wouldn't be awesome. But yeah, data science is everywhere.
But there
Data
are
science.
those algorithms running in the background already, especially with music apps, kind of sentimentizing. Is that a new word?
Invocation, I believe, is the word. Yeah,
Invocation.
yeah.
It sounds even more magical. But it is an active area that people are developing to try to kind of understand why people make the choices they make and why people have the tastes that they have.
Mm. And it's difficult because I don't think we, and I think this is kind of coming onto a point that I was going to make. I don't solve these problems, you know, like a traditional software program. To solve a problem using a software program, you need to understand the problem.
Yes, you
And
need to break it down. And
that's still true with AI. You still need to understand the problem. You can't just, hey, we didn't know, but it knows. I mean, they did use computer algorithms to find, what was it, unique pentagrams that have a given surface area or something. They're basically going to use it for stealth technology or something. But basically, you know, they know kind of this, if you know the scope of the task, like in a certain narrow way, and it's like, yeah, but we'll never work it out because we need you to do 500 billion calculations. It's like, hey, computers, awesome. But then there's stuff like we don't really understand society. We don't really understand the brain. We don't really understand a ton of things about how the world operates. I mean, and never understand because of chaos theory. You know, knowing the unless you know the initial conditions very well, you can't predict anything after that. Or given as, you know, a certain set of conditions at the start. The classic example is the kind of a two pivot rotating object that it is basically impossible to predict. And I think a lot of, certainly like the weather systems, they are chaotic. And we have, you know, I was looking today at some supercomputers online. You know, they're getting ever bigger, and seeing how many processors they've got. And you know, they've got. I think one of them had something like 10,000 gig of RAM or something. It was just unreal how much RAM it had. But ultimately, you're still dealing with a chaotic situation that, you know, I would like to.
So many.
Sorry.
Yeah, there. I think one of the good things that really intrigues me and gets me really excited is while the so-called technological bottlenecks that are happening, where the AI and all this wonderful stuff can potentially do a lot, and ultimately, if we're making a kind of a human counterpart in machine, but there are all these technological bottlenecks along the way, and we're so far down that chain. Even if we figure out one thing, there's so many more to figure out.
We're looking at certain problems like processing power, Moore's law, all that sort of stuff, and
yes.
Can we increase our processing power? And there are some people that think that quantum computing will answer that question, but that suffers from the same thing as AI.
It's a bit of a catch-22.
I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, but at the same time, it gives me a bit of hope, because while there's a lot of focus on STEM and not knocking STEM, at the same time, because you do get to these points where, like you say, we don't know how to model the problem yet, so how are we going to solve it? We don't know how to deconstruct the problem enough to say, okay, now if this, then that, and work itself through. But in some of the AI developing, they're looking into sociology and sociological models about how group dynamics and that sort of thing. So that fills me with joy. It takes everybody who harps on about what do you need to learn history for and all of that stuff, well, there you go. There's your data set. History has run through these scenarios, and these were the events that occurred in sequence. That for whatever reason, all the different variables that happened.
The AI can help us with is it can, a long time ago, where there is more, even in one topic, in one area, there are more papers than can be read.
Mm.
And I know that IBM Watson has looked at this, and with varying levels of success from what I've heard. But the idea that you can distill, and that's certainly a big area of research at the moment, are comparative studies in certain areas where it's almost meta, they're comparing the comparisons.
Yes.
And I think that's a big area for development. So specifically kind of bringing it back to your point, it's psychology, sociology, and computer science are huge fields in their own right. So you need to be you can't possibly be an expert in all three, but if you can have really high quality access to your questions, to having your questions answered about specific areas, you can become enough of an expert, which is kind of the Google generation. That's where we're at already, where you don't need to know the answer for things, you just need to know where to look. And I think a lot of is going to become like that. Bless you. Did you just hiccup?
Oh no, I was just thinking it also kind of it forces you to develop different skills as well, because back in the day in the Dewey Decimal System and all that stuff, how you conduct your research, primary sources, secondary sources, all of that stuff. There is a certain structure to research and a certain prioritization or categorization of what was more, I guess, truthful than something else, or at least more respectable. But nowadays, with
a huge amount of pressure to produce research, aren't they? So,
yeah,
is it all good?
Well, at the same time, you have lots of journal articles and that sort of thing, but it gets very specialist, and then you do have this in-depth, concentrated thing of information somewhere, in journal of whatever that subject is. But how often do people actually read them or come upon the exact article that they're looking for? I mean, nowadays, however, like you say, with Google and with searching and with all these various databases that have much better search algorithms that can help you actually find what you're looking for and rank them in a more useful way. But even beyond those databases, just how you research in the internet age, you have to be more discerning, because just because it came out of a book doesn't mean that it's true. Just because you read it on a web page doesn't mean it's true. And so you have to, they're kind of the research skills that people need to kind of evolve and develop with the tools that are coming into place. So it doesn't, in some ways, yes, it makes things easier, but in other ways, it requires more from the researcher, and requires more from the person asking the question to be aware of what kind of answers could be coming at them and learn to filter. It's that learning process. And yeah, that does take time.
Maybe that's the enhancement of people's of standards generally. The world overall, despite what people may think, is improving. It is safer. It is a more learned place. Is that maybe that's part of the standards improving? Is that the more, if there were only ever 3 papers on a topic, you've got to reference all 3 of them. Whereas if there are 500, you've got to sift through those. You've got to know those. You've got to know the authors, know maybe their schools of thought.
You have to actually read each one. Yeah.
Much more complex a picture than just, Aristotle said this, so it must be true, because he's Aristotle.
He's old, and anything from a long time ago, and is quoted as has more value somehow.
We're massively sentimentalizing the Greek.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on, sort of touch on that moral aspect that they talked a lot about in the book. They kind of bookended it, about professions and professionals being the what do you call them, pillars of community and that sort of thing. And then in the end, they talk about Mr. Is it Michael Sandel? Am I remembering his name right? And the idea of market triumphalism, how people are uncomfortable with so many things becoming commoditized, and does that mean do we lose some sort of ethical grounding in commoditizing some of these things? I think one of the examples he had was you could pay more to get a better room or a better something or other in prison. I didn't even know that was an option. These sorts of things where you get like upgrades if you could pay. And of course, I think
that's the it's called the Sandel argument from Michael Sandel, the political.
Sandel, okay, not Sandel, Sandel, the other way around.
Yeah, Sandel. It's not spelled like a shoe.
Yes, I mispronounced it and pronounced it like the shoe.
There's S-A.
Sorry, Mr. Sandel.
Got it right. I think you got it right. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think in working in a field where there is a section about lost craft, the idea of, okay, if you kind of start to extract bits and pieces from a profession and start to automate those things, do you end up deconstructing a craft? And by deconstructing, you lose what was more than the sum of its parts. You kind of lose the value of the whole craft and the practitioner, or having such a practitioner. Back to the idea of like living, not living legends. What are they called in Japan?
Taisho.
Like there's like one guy in the whole country left who could do this thing. Living artifacts, or I forget the term, but basically not just yes, I mean not just things themselves are of value, but the knowledge and having it being embodied in a person, that there's a value in that. And I'm kind of two minds here of it, because I do agree it is helpful if you could, if all I could do is access a database and find out a lot more information. I feel like I could do my craft more quickly, and I could probably do trial and error more quickly, or at least weed out what, if I need to test a treatment. And normally, let's say I could read 20 articles, if I'm lucky, around it. And then 16 of them say that it's doable, but they all have these different problems. And then 4 of them say, don't do it at all. That's going to give me a certain perspective on it. But if I had the assistance of an AI type database that could distill down the information and just say, well, we've consulted 2,000 articles, not just in your field, but in kind of related fields who did X with this material. It's going to give me a bigger picture.
There was a review of psychology papers, and they found something like, I can't remember the statistic, I'm going to make this number up and I'm probably way wrong, but it feels right, that something like 63%, it was the majority anyway, of these psychology papers findings were not reproducible. So I think at the moment, I don't think that is something that you can avoid. You could avoid doing if you told the system lies and you told it was true, because it's data and it doesn't have the ability to discern.
Yes, then we end up with the Microsoft Twitter AI experiment.
Oh yes. Yes.
That's pretty much exactly that playing out.
Yeah, I can't remember what it did. Didn't it like want to do a Holocaust or something? Didn't I feel like Hitler came in really rapidly?
Yeah, I think it got racist really, really quickly. It just
Racist really, really fast. Yeah, you
within the
teach
same
it bad
day.
rules. Be a bad person. Maybe that's a lesson for us all. You teach people bad lessons.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the jury.
I think that's the core of Frankenstein that people often miss out.
Yes.
Poor Frankenstein, misunderstood, got the wrong information, hung out with the wrong people, and then, you know, if he only saw the world slightly differently, he might be less feeling as injured as he was.
I know how to read that. I read that ages. Hey, so I was just thinking about the, talking about Sandel's argument, and he has 2 points that the reason that you shouldn't marketificate, if you will, things is because of 2 things, and this is, again, we're back into culture again, is because of corruption.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy something, then you can buy justice, you can buy the truth. So that, again, example I always use is healthcare, because it's such a pertinent issue, and the difference between, say, the American and the UK system couldn't be more stark, it seems to me. And it's a very there's one system, then there's the other system. And I think in Britain, we do rely on a lot of American innovations in medical treatment, and we do produce our own as well. So it's not, it's not just, thanks, the free market gives us innovation, and then, a socialist system gives us. But there is definitely a question there about, if we marketize everything that we do, including all of our professions, are we going to end up creating a world that is corrupt, and a world a world that is corrupt and intentionally kind of serves the wrong people? And are we going to create a world, I've forgotten what the other bit was. That's enough. It was corruption was one.
Oh, corruption and where has it gone? Moral limits, inequality. That's it.
And inequality. That was it. So that basically, you'll end up, unless we had like a post-scarcity world from some sort of E&M Banks culture universe where everyone gets everything for free because there's just we can. If you don't live in that universe, then while there are limited resources, the people who have the most cash or influence or power get the best results. So you're basically saying, if you're born poor, you'll die poor. Statistically, obviously, there are always going to be individuals who, social class to another, and that goes both ways. But statistically speaking, you're born rich, you'll live longer. You're born poor, you'll die quicker. And that's the sort of thing that I know that is cultural. I don't think that's a universal law that we should inherently be more equal, but I believe it. I believe that we should be. I believe that, the world should be a fairer place. But there are, some of that of the free market enables us to do these sorts of things where, ultimately we're asking, should AIs be allowed to take jobs? Assuming that we can, automate processes, should that even be allowed? The great example would be things like the London Underground, where now all the drivers, or many of the drivers, are stood on platforms assisting people, so that people didn't lose jobs. Do we end up creating this universe where we have 10 billion people who are doing basically pointless jobs because they've got to do something, so they'll stand there and make people feel good about themselves while the universe runs itself quietly in the background? I think that's, it's a bit science fiction at the moment, but yeah, it could happen.
I think even if, this alternate model of society kind of, well, first of all, let's go back a bit, because in the book they do mention the NHS in regards to the objections of either corruption or the inequality side. And in regards to the inequality side, I'm just going to read it directly from here. It says, the market is not involved in paying. Whether you personally can afford it, it has no bearing on whether you have access to the healthcare. However, the market is involved in producing the healthcare. So it's kind of, it's saying just because it's, well, the UK NHS system is an interesting example, right? Because if you were saying the American system, it's all kind of capitalist driven, from access really to the running of it, versus the UK system where it's kind of a socialist system that everyone has access to. That's the kind of the socialist side to it. But then the running of it within itself, its procurement and all of that is...
And it does still have, I mean, we don't like to admit it, but it is still private in certain areas. My dad is a retired GP, and they are technically all self-employed, because of the deal that Kieran Bevan struck with doctors. He stuffed their mouth with gold, famously was his quote. And as a result, we kind of already... Oh, hello. Hello. We already have the system there where it's... yeah, you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's one thing that we can't forget is that even in a, until we have infinite resources and infinite support, we can't live in a utopia where the market doesn't get involved and people don't profit, because that's our method of developing innovation, really.
It sounds... Well, the model I always think of is, like magnets. There's the polarizing sides, but this is where my engineering knowledge falls apart because I'm not an engineer, so don't,
Me neither. Don't judge me.
Don't judge me. But there are kind of like magnet-driven motors and engines, and it's that works because of it. By definition, it has these polarities, so it kind of flips back and forth and back and forth. In some ways, kind of like galvanic reactions, it's those autocatalytic reactions where it just creates more, sorry, now I'm thinking of iron desalination. Sorry, going off on a tangent, but basically...
I'm enjoying it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's roll it.
Basically, it's because of the properties within the system, it drives itself until it runs out of that core fuel of the reactant. And I think that is, in my mind, a metaphor for the market. It's not physics in the sense of nothing is destroyed or created kind of a thing. That there is a reactant and it does peter out. But as long as it can run into an autocatalytic cycle where it keeps itself going for a while.
Interesting point.
And then there are these other ideas that maybe it's some sort of halfway house where we could have some sort of market aspects to life where there's strivers and actors, and then they get rewarded for it. But there is the bottom line, the cutoff. There isn't one because things like universal income, which I don't know if you heard recently, Elon Musk threw that idea out as going, yes, I'm working on robots and AIs and all that stuff, but if we have universal income, perhaps that's a way to keep everything's on a level also, without driving the divide.
Universal income is very simple to administer compared to some of our very complex unemployment, pension, and other laws. do you have, in the UK it would be, do you have a national insurance number? I don't know the actual mechanics of how it would work, but it'd be something along the lines of, are you an adult? Yes. And that would be kind of easy to administer. It wouldn't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to then. There always feels like there's a bit of judgment. There's judgment around universal credit and all that stuff. And how do you say someone is worth this credit and someone else isn't just because the numbers worked out that way? I don't think it paints a clear enough picture, and that's a limitation to that kind of system.
And you get the consequences that way, and that's the thing. You end up with, well, someone who you would have thought would deserve the money, and someone who you wouldn't have thought doesn't deserve the money gets the money, and it's because it's a very stringent rule set, and that's it. That's the rules. Sorry, you deserve it, but you're not getting it. Whereas, something like universal credit, it's simple. There you go.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Swiss are looking at it. Have they actually done it yet?
I think I read that the Finns and the Dutch will be trialing it in 2017, and the Swiss are holding a referendum to see whether or not they want to do it. So,
but Switzerland, these are all affluent countries, aren't they?
Well, and also have a very limited population.
Yes.
I'm really holding out hope for it. It does seem, kind of a...
I think it would be quite cost effective, and I think things like the fuel allowance that some elderly people get. What I would hope is that there's some sort of cultural rule would kick in where you receive this money to be more charitable, because if you don't need the money, if you really don't need it, give it away. Give it to somebody who does. There's obviously, that is kind of getting on my liberal high horse there, but I honestly do believe in people.
I'm really holding out hope for how this plays out in those countries. But at the same time, it's a very small population compared to some other places.
Mm.
And their demographic in the sense of ages might not necessarily map on directly to other countries.
That's going to be the interesting part, isn't it? Well, because there's obviously in these countries there are aging populations. In these countries, they're already in the highest percentage of the world's earners.
Yeah.
Whatever the margin that is. So it'd be interesting to see how that works. I too am really fascinated to see how that goes. Righty-ho, I think I'm going to have to...
Yes. You're going to hide behind the eye of Sauron.
The eye of Sauron. I am watching you and coming for your jobs. What are you doing? I'm going to take...
I think I'm going to go check on Maya. She's been very, very patient. Vocal, but patient.
Yeah. Well, it's her prerogative. All right, well, you go do your thing.
Alrighty.
Thanks very much for this. I really enjoyed our chat. It was good fun.
Yeah. Look forward to the next one. We'll be in the new year, I think. Everyone's busy with festive things in the coming weeks. So we'll crack open another book and think like adults again.
All right. Cool. All right. Look forward to it.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.